They have money.
Oil. Oil is everything. You can't print money as fast as you can get oil out of the ground.
Power.
They're trying to pin global warming on us.
Never apologise, never explain. How long have we got? Between 5 and 10 years before the warming becomes unstoppable. So this is the end of civilization.
Burn up.
God bless global warming!
New drama, tomorrow at 9 on BBC Two.
A big step forward in the fight against climate change by the world's richest nations.
Now, scientists are warning that the emperor penguin could be extinct by the end of the century because of global warming.
At 6 o'clock, no more doubt, climate change is happening and we are to blame.
Leading scientists predict that by the end of the century, some parts of Europe will be too hot to live in.
As temperatures soar and sea levels rise, the verdict from the world's leading climate scientist, the human race guilty of global warming.
I've often heard it said that there is a consensus of thousands of scientists on the global warming issue and that humans are causing a catastrophic change to the climate system. Well, I am one scientist, and there are many that simply think that is not true.
The IPCC, like any UN body, is political. The final conclusions are politically driven.
This claim that the IPCC is the world's top 1,500 or 2,500 scientists, you look at the bibliographies of the people and it's simply not true. There are quite a number of non-scientists.
And to build the number up to 2,500, they have to start taking reviewers and government people and so on, anyone who ever came close to them. And none of them are asked to agree. Many of them disagree.
Those people who are specialists but don't agree with the polemic and resign, and there have been a number that I know of, they are simply put on the author list and become part of this 2,500 of the world's top scientists.
People have decided you have to convince other people that since no scientist disagrees, you shouldn't disagree either. But that, whenever you hear that in science, that's pure propaganda.
Climate scientists need there to be a problem in order to get funding.
We have a vested interest in creating panic because then money will flow to climate science.
Fact of the matter is that tens of thousands of jobs depend upon global warming right now. It's a big business.
It's become a great industry in itself. And if the whole global warming farrago collapsed, there'd be an awful lot of people out of jobs and looking for work.
If we look at climate through the geological time frame, we would never suspect CO2 as a major climate driver.
None of the major climate changes in the last 1,000 years can be explained by CO2.
When people say we don't believe in global warming, I say no, I believe in global warming. I don't believe that human CO2 is causing that warming.
I have seen and heard their spitting fury at anybody who might disagree with them, which is not the scientific way.
A few years ago, if you would ask me, I would tell you it's CO2. Why? Because just like everyone else in the public, I listened to what the media had to say. There were periods, for example, in Earth's history when we had 3 times as much CO2 as we have today, or periods when we had 10 times as much CO2 as we have today. And if CO2 has a large effect on climate, then you should see it in the temperature reconstruction.
If we look at climate through the geological time frame, we would never suspect CO2 as a major climate driver.
None of the major climate changes in the last 1,000 years can be explained by CO2.
We can't say that CO2 will drive climate. It certainly never did in the past.
The global warming alarm is dressed up as science, but it's not science. It's propaganda.
There's no direct evidence which links 20th century global warming to anthropogenic greenhouse gases.
We're just being told lies. That's what it comes down to.
If the CO2 increases in the atmosphere as a greenhouse gas, then the temperature will go up. But the ice core record shows exactly the opposite. So the fundamental assumption, the most fundamental assumption of the whole theory of climate change due to humans is shown to be wrong.
The whole thing stinks.
All the models, every one of them, calculates that the warming should be faster as you go up from the surface into the atmosphere. And in fact, the maximum warming over the equator should take place at an altitude of about 10 kilometers.
That data gives you a handle on the fact that what you're seeing is warming that probably is not due to greenhouse gases.
That is, the observations do not show an increase with altitude. In fact, most observations show a slight decrease in the rate of warming with altitude. So in a sense, you can say that the hypothesis of man-made global warming is falsified by the evidence.
There's one thing you shouldn't say, and that is, this might not be a problem.
See, I don't even like to call it the environmental movement anymore, because really it is a political activist movement, and they have become hugely influential at a global level. By the mid-'80s, a majority of people now agreed with all of the reasonable things we in the environmental movement were saying they should do. Now, when a majority of people agree with you, it's pretty hard to remain confrontational with them. And so the only way to remain anti-establishment was to adopt ever more extreme positions. When I left Greenpeace, it was in the midst of them adopting a campaign to ban chlorine worldwide. Like I said, you guys, this is one of the elements in the periodic table, you know. I mean, I'm not sure if that's in our jurisdiction to be banning a whole element.
Destroying the wall were soon down.
The other reason that environmental extremism emerged was because world communism failed, the wall came down, and a lot of peaceniks and political activists moved into the environmental movement, bringing their neo-Marxism with them, and learned to use green language in a very clever way to cloak agendas that actually have more to do with anti-capitalism and anti-globalization than they do anything with ecology or science.
Well, carbon dioxide clearly is an industrial gas, and sort of tied in with economic growth, with transportation in cars, with what we call civilization. And there are forces in the environmental movement that are simply against economic growth. They think that's bad.
It could be used to legitimize a whole suite of myths that already existed: anti-car, anti-growth, anti-development, and above all, anti that great Satan, the US.
Ladies and gentlemen, the accusations of corruption on the part of Neil Hamilton had a number of devastating consequences. They removed from ministerial office and then Parliament an extremely able Member of Parliament and Minister. They destroyed a successful company with a blue-chip client list, Ian Gray Associates, and Baroness Turner of Camden lost her job as an official Labour frontbench spokesman in the House of Lords. They gave rise to accusations of Tory sleaze, which cost the Conservative Party dearly at the general election. They seriously damaged the standing of Parliament in the eyes of the British people. I'm a close friend of Neil Hamilton and believe him to be innocent of the charge of taking cash in return for tabling parliamentary questions which ended his career. But it is the damage to Parliament brought about by a conspiracy between the notorious Egyptian liar, Mr. Fayed, and the Guardian newspaper, which is the most serious consequence of their combined campaign. The Palace of Westminster is therefore the most appropriate forum to present Jonathan Hunt's book, Trial by Conspiracy, a painstaking forensic account which claims to expose the crude campaign of deceit, forgery and intimidation by which some Guardian journalists sought to discredit both Neil Hamilton and the Conservative Party. According to Jonathan Hunt's research, the accusation that Neil Hamilton received cash from Fayed for asking questions in Parliament was not made until after Fayed had failed in his attempts to overturn the Department of Trade and Industry's inspector's report, which found that the Fayeds had lied about virtually everything in their quest for the House of Fraser. Fayed failed in 1992 to get the new Corporate Affairs Minister Neil Hamilton to intervene, because he refused. He failed in September 1994 to get the European Court of Human Rights to help, and finally his appeal to the Prime Minister John Major was rebuffed. It was then that he went for broke and invented the cash for questions allegations against Hamilton. The Guardian claimed to have raised the issue in a face-to-face interview with Neil Hamilton in 1993, a claim he refutes. The book argues that Guardian journalists fabricated their records to fit their claim. The significance of the date is that by proving Fayed did not make the accusations until September 1994, Hunt has exposed the true motive behind the conspiracy: revenge for Fayed and damage to the Conservative cause for the Guardian.